I parked a tank on my front lawn, and the HOA lost their minds. But here's the thing. It was completely legal, and there was nothing they could do about it. This is the story of how a HOA board member tried to destroy my life over a pickup truck, and how I fought back with 43 tons of military hardware. My name is Jack Morrison, and I'm a 62-year-old retired Army veteran. I spent 25 years serving my country, including 3 tours overseas. When I finally retired in 2019, I bought my dream home in Meadow Brook Estates, a quiet suburban neighborhood in Colorado, with mountain views and friendly neighbors. Or so I thought. The trouble started on a sunny morning in April 2023. I was in my garage, polishing my pride and joy, a 1985 Chevy Seaton pickup truck in cherry red. This wasn't just any truck. This was the same model my father drove when I was growing up. He passed away in 2015, and I'd spent 3 years restoring this beauty in his memory. Every bolt, every inch of chrome, every detail was perfect. I heard the clicking of heels on my driveway before I saw her. Karen Whitmore. She was a 47-year-old HOA board member with an expensive blonde bob, designer sunglasses that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage, and a permanent scowl that made her look like she'd been sucking on lemons for the past decade. "Mr. Morrison," she said, her voice dripping with fake politeness, "we need to talk about that vehicle." I straightened up and wiped my hands on a rag. "Good morning, Karen. Something I can help you with." She wrinkled her nose like she'd smelled something rotten. "That truck is an eyesore. It's lowering property values in our community. The HOA board has decided it needs to go." I felt my jaw tighten. "Excuse me. This truck is registered, insured, and parked in my own driveway. What's the problem?" Karen pulled out a folder. She always had a folder, and flipped through some papers. "According to HOA, Covenant Section 7, Subsection 12, all vehicles visible from the street must be newer than 10 years old and maintain a certain aesthetic standard. Your truck is 38 years old, and frankly, it's ugly." "Ugly!" She called my father's truck ugly. "This truck is a classic," I said, keeping my voice level. "It's worth about $25,000. I've put hundreds of hours into restoring it. I don't care if it's worth $250,000. Karen snapped, dropping the fake politeness. "It's old, it's rusty-looking, and it doesn't belong in a premium community like Meadowbrook Estates. You have 30 days to remove it, or you'll face fines of $100 per day." She turned on her heel and walked away before I could respond. I stood there, stunned, watching her climb into her brand-new Mercedes SUV, the kind that costs about $85,000, and drive off. That evening, I called Barbara Chun, the HOA president. Barbara was a 60-year-old retired lawyer with blonde hair, red glasses, and a reputation for being fair and reasonable. She always wore her signature red blazer to HOA meetings, and unlike Karen, she actually cared about the community rather than just bossing people around. "Jack, I heard about Karen's visit," Barbara said with a sigh. "I'm looking at the covenant now. Technically, she's not wrong about the 10-year rule. But that rule was meant for abandoned vehicles and cars on blocks. Your truck is clearly a maintained classic vehicle. This is ridiculous. Can you overrule her? Primera, asked. I can bring it to the full board vote at next month's meeting. But Karen has 2 allies on the 5-person board, Linda and Robert. They usually vote with her. I'll need to convince at least one of them to see a reason. And if they vote against me..." Barbara was quiet for a moment. "Then technically, the HOA can enforce the covenant and start fining you." "Jack, I'll do everything I can. But Karen's been looking for a fight lately. She's angry because I blocked her proposal to raise HOA fees by 40% last year. I think she sees you as a way to undermine my authority." After hanging up, I sat on my porch, staring at my truck. 25 years of military service, and I couldn't even park my own vehicle in my own driveway. Something about that felt fundamentally wrong. That's when I remembered something from my Army days. I pulled out my phone and called my old buddy, Mike Rodriguez. Mike ran a military surplus business in Nevada. We'd served together in the Gulf War back in the 90s. "Mike, it's Jack Morrison." I need to ask you something weird. Do you still have that MS-60 Patton tank you were talking about last year?" Mike laughed. "The one I bought from the army auction? Yeah, it's sitting in my lot." "Why? Is it street legal?" "Absolutely. Decommissioned rubber treads instead of metal, main gun welded shut. It's basically a 43-ton lawn ornament that happens to be able to drive." "Why do you ask?" I explained the situation with Karen and the HOA. Mike was silent for a moment, then burst out laughing. "You're thinking what I think you're thinking." "Maybe. How much would you charge to transport it to Colorado?" "For you, I'll do it for free. This is too good to pass up." "But, Jack, are you sure about this?" I looked at my truck again, thinking about my father, thinking about serving my country for a quarter century, thinking about Karen's sneer when she called it ugly. "Yeah, Mike. I'm sure, but let's wait until after the board vote. If they side with me, great. If not, I want to have a backup plan." The HOA board meeting was held on May 15th, 2023, in the community center. About 30 residents showed up, which was unusual. Word had gotten around about Karen's crusade against my truck. Barbara called the meeting to order. She wore her red blazer and had her red glasses perched on her nose, looking every bit the professional mediator. Item 7 on tonight's agenda, the complaint filed by Karen Whitmore regarding Jack Morrison's 1985 Chevy pickup truck. "Karen, you have the floor." Karen stood up, smoothing her designer dress. "Thank you, Barbara. This is quite simple. We have rules in this community for a reason. Mr. Morrison's vehicle violates our covenants. If we let him keep it, we set a precedent. Soon, everyone will have old junkers in their driveways, and our property values will plummet. I move that we enforce the covenant and require removal of the vehicle within 30 days. Linda, a thin woman in her 50s, who always agreed with Karen, immediately seconded the motion. Barbara nodded. "Thank you, Karen." "Jack, would you like to respond?" I stood up. My hands were shaking slightly, but my voice was steady. "I'm a veteran. I served this country for 25 years. That truck belonged to my father. I restored it in his memory after he died. It's not a junker. It's a classic vehicle worth $25,000. I keep it in pristine condition. I'm not hurting anyone by parking it in my own driveway." Several neighbors clapped. Tom and Susan Chun, Barbara's cousins who lived 2 doors down from me, both nodded in agreement. Karen rolled her eyes. "We all respect your service, Mr. Morrison, but that doesn't give you the right to ignore our covenants. Rules are rules." Robert, a heavy-set man in his 60s who owned a construction company, raised his hand. "I've seen Jack's truck. It's beautiful. My dad had a truck just like it. This seems like we're being too strict." I felt a surge of hope. Robert was supposed to be one of Karen's allies. Karen's face reddened. "Robert, this isn't about nostalgia. This is about maintaining standards." "Actually," Barbara interjected, holding up a document, "I did some research. Our covenant says vehicles must be properly maintained and not in a state of disrepair. Jack's truck is clearly maintained. The 10-year age limit appears to have been added informally to the HOA handbook 3 years ago, but it was never officially voted on and added to the actual covenant. Technically, it's not enforceable." Karen's expression turned venomous. "That's a technicality. Barbara, you're just protecting him because you don't like me." Barbara remained calm. "I'm following the actual legal documents, Karen. That's my job as president. Then I call for an emergency vote to officially add the age restriction to the covenant right now." "You can't do that," Barbara said. "Covenant changes require a 30-day notice period and a 2/3 majority vote of all homeowners, not just the board." Karen stood up abruptly. "Fine. Then I'll collect signatures for a petition. If I get 51% of homeowners to sign, we can force a vote. And, Mr. Morrison, you better believe I'll make sure that vote goes my way." She stormed out of the meeting. Linda scurried after her. Barbara looked at me and gave a subtle nod. She'd done what she could, but the look in her eyes said, "Be prepared for a fight." Over the next 2 weeks, Karen went door to door with her petition. She told neighbors my truck was bringing down property values. She showed them manipulated photos where she'd added rust and damage to make my truck look terrible. She even started a rumor that I was planning to open an auto repair shop in my garage. Tom Chun told me that Karen had offered to pay for his driveway repaving if he signed. Another neighbor, elderly Mrs. Patton, said Karen had threatened to report her for having her trash bins visible from the street if she didn't sign. June 1st, 2023, Karen had her signatures. 73 homeowners out of 140 had signed her petition. Barbara called me with the news. "Jack, I'm so sorry. The vote is scheduled for June 27th. If the covenant change passes, you'll have to remove your truck or pay $100 per day in fines." Yes, Jack, Karen's playing dirty. She's been spreading lies and making threats. But legally, if she has the votes, there's nothing I can do. I understand, Barbara. Thanks for trying. What are you going to do? I looked out my window at my truck, gleaming in the afternoon sun. Then I pulled up Mike's number on my phone. I'm going to fight back, Barbara, in a way Karen never saw coming. I called Mike that night. The tank. I need it delivered on June 21st, one day before the vote. You got it, brother. This is going to be epic. Mike, one question. Is it legal to park a decommissioned tank on residential property? I checked with my lawyer after you. First asked, as long as it's properly registered as a military vehicle collectible, has rubber treads so it doesn't damage roads, and the weapons systems are deactivated, it's completely legal. It's no different than parking a large RV or boat. Some municipalities have size restrictions, but I checked Colorado Springs ordinances, you're clear, and HOA covenants. Well, that's the beautiful part. Your HOA covenant says no vehicles over 10 years old, but there's an exception for recreational vehicles, boats, and collector's items properly stored. A tank is definitely a collector's item, and technically, since it'll be on your lawn rather than the driveway, it's properly stored on your property. I smiled for the first time in weeks. Let's do this. June 21st, 2023. Started as a normal Wednesday morning. Neighbors were leaving for work. Kids were waiting for the school bus. Karen was probably in her home office, plotting her next petty tyranny. Then, at 9:37 in the morning, a massive military transport truck turned onto Oak Street, followed by 2 escort vehicles. On the flatbed was 43 tons of American military history. An M60 Patton tank painted in desert camouflage with the number 762 painted on its turret. Mike had come personally to deliver it. The truck stopped in front of my house, and a small crowd began to gather. People came out of their homes, staring in disbelief. "Jack!" Mike called out, grinning from ear to ear. "Where do you want it?" I pointed to my front lawn, right next to where my truck was parked. "Right there is perfect." It took 3 hours to offload the tank and position it. Mike's crew used special equipment to lower it onto my lawn without damaging the grass too much. By early afternoon, the tank sat on my property, its long barrel pointing toward the street, an American flag mounted on the turret. The entire neighborhood came out to see it. Tom and Susan Chun were laughing hysterically. Mrs. Patterson said it was the most exciting thing that had happened in Meadow Estates in 40 years. Even people who had signed Karen's petition were taking selfies with the tank. Barbara showed up around 3 in the afternoon. She stood on the sidewalk, her mouth open, her red glasses slightly askew. "Jack," she finally said, "you parked a tank on your lawn." "I did," I replied. 43 tons of freedom. And before you ask, yes, it's completely legal. It's a registered military collector's item. The main gun is welded shut. It has rubber treads, and it's not violating any municipal ordinances. Barbara started laughing. She laughed so hard she had to take off her glasses and wipe her eyes. "Karen is going to lose her mind." "That's the idea." Barbara composed herself and pulled out her phone. "I need to take a picture of this. For documentation purposes." At 4:17 p.m., I got a call from an unknown number. I answered. "What have you done?" Karen's voice was so loud, I had to hold the phone away from my ear. "I parked a collector's item on my property. Primera cite calmly. Is there a problem? That thing is a monstrosity. It's an eyesore. It's dangerous. Actually, Karen, it's completely decommissioned and street legal. And according to HOA Covenant Section 7, subsection 12, exception clause, collector's items are allowed on properties. This is a genuine M60 Patton tank from the 1960s. It's definitely a collector's item. You can't do this. I just did. See you at tomorrow's vote, Karen. I hung up. That evening, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. News vans showed up. Apparently someone had posted about the tank on social media, and it had gone viral. Local reporters wanted interviews. My story was trending on Twitter with the hashtag HOA Tank Guy. I gave one interview to a local news station. I'm a veteran, I told the reporter. I served this country for 25 years. All I wanted was to park my father's truck in my driveway. When the HOA tried to stop me, I decided to show them what real vehicle problems look like. This tank is completely legal, and it's staying right where it is until the HOA drops their ridiculous crusade against my truck. The segment aired that night on the 10 o'clock news. By morning, it had been picked up by national news outlets. But here's what I didn't know yet, and what would only come out later. Karen had been doing a lot more than just harassing me about my truck. She'd been running a scheme, embezzling money from the HOA, inflating contractor bills, and pocketing the difference. And my tank, my act of defiance, was about to shine a spotlight on everything she'd been hiding. The next morning, June 22nd, the day of the vote, I woke up to find 3 black SUVs parked on the street. Men in suits with FBI badges were knocking on Karen's door. Barbara called me, her voice shaking with excitement. Jack, you're not going to believe this. The tank stunt caught so much media attention that someone did a deep dive into our HOA finances. Karen's been stealing from us for 3 years. The FBI is investigating her right now. But that's just the beginning of this story. What happened next will shock you. Did the FBI arrest Karen? Did I keep the tank? And what other secrets came out about Karen's schemes? Make sure to comment below with your thoughts on HOA rules and whether you think I went too far with the tank. Part 2 is coming soon. And trust me, you won't want to miss what happens when federal agents start looking into Karen's financial records. In Part 1, I introduced myself, Jack Morrison, a 62-year-old retired Army veteran. When HOA board member Karen Whitmore tried to force me to remove my restored 1985 Chevy pickup truck, I fought back by parking a 43-ton M60 Patton tank on my front lawn. The stunt went viral, and just as we were about to vote on Karen's petition, FBI agents showed up at her door. Now, let me tell you what happened next. June 22nd, 2023. Started with the most dramatic neighborhood scene Meadowbrook Estates had ever witnessed. 3 black SUVs, 6 FBI agents in navy windbreakers, with bright yellow letters on the back, and one very pale Karen Whitmore standing in her doorway in a silk bathrobe. I was drinking coffee on my porch, sitting in a lawn chair I'd positioned right next to my tank. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd parked military hardware on my lawn to protest HOA overreach. And now federal agents were investigating the very person who'd started this whole mess. Barbara pulled up in her silver Honda at 7:45 a.m., still wearing her red blazer, from what must have been an early morning emergency call. She jogged over to my porch, her red glasses slightly crooked. "Jack, this is insane," she said, slightly out of breath. "I got a call at 6 this morning from Agent Rodriguez. Apparently, someone saw the news coverage about your tank and recognized our HOA name. They sent an anonymous tip to the FBI about financial irregularities." "What kind of I asked, though I had a pretty good idea. Barbara pulled out her tablet and showed me a spreadsheet. "Last night, I couldn't sleep. So I started going through our HOA financial records, really looking at them for the first time in 3 years. Jack, we've been paying a landscaping company called Green Elite Services $4,500 per month. That's $54,000 per year for basic lawn maintenance. That seems high. It's astronomical. I called 3 other companies this morning. The going rate for a community our size is about $1,500 per month. We've been overpaying by $3,000 monthly for 3 years. That's $108,000 in excess payments. I let out a low whistle. Let me guess. Karen approved those contracts. She didn't just approve them. She insisted on them. And here's the kicker. Green Elite Services was registered 2 months before Karen joined the HOA board. The owner is listed as K. Whitmore Enterprises. She was paying herself. She was paying herself with our money. And that's just the landscaping. I found similar patterns with our security service, our pool maintenance, even our holiday lighting installations. Every contractor we use is connected to Karen. Somehow, either she owns them, her husband owns them, or they're paying kickbacks. Across the street, FBI agents were carrying boxers out of Karen's house. Karen stood on her lawn, now dressed in designer jeans and a cashmere sweater, talking rapidly to a man in a suit who I assumed was her lawyer. Agent Sarah Rodriguez, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, with her hair pulled back in a tight bun, walked over to us. She'd introduced herself briefly earlier. Mr. Morrison, Ms. Chun, I need to ask you some questions about your HOA's financial management. Barbara immediately went into lawyer mode. Agent Rodriguez, I'm the HOA president. Whatever you need, I'll provide full cooperation. I've already prepared a summary of concerning transactions. That's helpful, Ms. Chun. I understand you only recently discovered these irregularities. Last night, after Jack's tank made national news, I started receiving calls from neighbors asking about HOA finances. I realized I'd been too trusting. Karen always handled the financial reports, and I approved them without deep scrutiny. That was my mistake. Agent Rodriguez nodded. Don't be too hard on yourself. People like Ms. Whitmore are skilled at manipulation. They often target positions of minor authority where oversight is lax. HOAs are actually a common target for this type of fraud. How much are we talking about? Primera, Askid. Based on preliminary analysis, somewhere between $350,000 and $450,000 over the past 4 years. Barbaroux's face went white. She grabbed the porch railing to steady herself. I jumped up and guided her to my chair. $450,000, Barbara whispered. That's almost our entire reserve fund. We're supposed to have $500,000 saved for major repairs and emergencies. Ms. Whitmore has been very clever, Agent Rodriguez said. She's been skimming enough to make herself wealthy, but not so much that it would trigger immediate red flags. The HOA fees are high enough that most residents assume the money is being well managed. What happens now? Barbara asked. We're executing a search warrant on Ms. Whitmore's home and business properties. We're also freezing her bank accounts. Based on what we've found so far, she likely faced charges of wire fraud, embezzlement, money laundering, and potentially tax evasion. If convicted, she's looking at 20 to 30 years in federal prison. I looked over at Karen. She was crying now, mascara running down her face, gesturing frantically at her lawyer. For someone who'd spent the last 2 months making my life miserable over a pickup truck, she suddenly looked very small. There's one more thing, Agent Rodriguez said. Ms. Whitmore has been operating this scheme with at least one accomplice. We believe it's another board member. Do you know? Linda Westbrook? Barbara's eyes widened. Linda's been Karen's closest ally on the board. She votes with Karen on everything. We'll be talking to Ms. Westbrook this afternoon. In the meantime, I'd advise you to call an emergency HOA meeting. Your residents deserve to know what's been happening with their money. After Agent Rodriguez left, Barbara and I sat in silence for a few minutes, watching the FBI agents continue their work. News vans were starting to arrive again. Word had spread about the FBI presence. Jack, Barbara finally said, your tank saved us. What do you mean? If you hadn't parked that tank? If it hadn't gone viral? If someone hadn't seen the news and recognized our HOA name and sent that tip to the FBI, we never would have known. Karen would have kept stealing. By the time anyone noticed, she would have drained our entire reserve fund. I was just trying to keep my truck. Barbara laughed, a slightly hysterical edge to it. You were trying to keep your truck, and you accidentally exposed a major fraud scheme. You're a hero, Jack. I'm really not. Yes, you are. And I'm calling an emergency meeting for tonight. Every resident needs to hear this. The community center was packed that evening. Every single one of our 140 homeowners showed up, plus spouses, plus several news crews who'd been allowed to film from the back of the room. Barbara stood at the podium in her red blazer, looking more composed than she had that morning. Next to her was Agent Rodriguez and a forensic accountant named David Chun, no relation to Barbara, who'd been going through the HOA books all day. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," Barbara began. "I'm going to be direct. For the past 4 years, board member Karen Whitmore has been systematically stealing from our HOA. The FBI estimates the total theft at approximately $425,000. The room erupted. People were shouting questions. Some were crying. Others looked furious. Barbara raised her hands for quiet. "I know you have questions. I'm angry too. I'm angry at Karen, and I'm angry at myself for not catching this sooner." David Chun, our forensic accountant, is going to explain exactly how the scheme worked. David stepped forward with a laptop connected to a projector. He displayed a series of spreadsheets that showed the inflated contractor payments, the shell companies, the kickback schemes. Ms. Whitmore was sophisticated, David explained. She created multiple layers of corporate entities. The money would flow from the HOA to what appeared to be legitimate contractors, then through several business accounts, and eventually land in accounts controlled by Ms. Whitmore. She paid taxes on some of it to avoid IRS scrutiny, but she still netted approximately $300,000 over 4 years. "How did nobody notice?" shouted Tom Chun from the audience. Barbara took the microphone again. "That's on me, Tom." Karen was in charge of financial reports. She presented summaries at board meetings, and I approved them without demanding to see the detailed receipts and invoices. She also cultivated an image as someone who was tough on spending, always talking about property values and fiscal responsibility. It provided perfect cover. What about Linda Westbrook? Someone else called out. "Agent Rodriguez mentioned her this morning." Agent Rodriguez stepped forward. "Ms. Westbrook has been cooperating with our investigation. It appears she was aware of at least some of Ms. Whitmore's activities and received payments totaling approximately $45,000 to keep quiet and support Ms. Whitmore's initiatives on the board. Ms. Westbrook is negotiating a plea deal in exchange for testimony against Ms. Whitmore." The meeting lasted 3 hours. Barbara answered every question, took responsibility for her oversight failures, and outlined a plan to recover the stolen money and implement better financial controls. Robert, the construction company owner who'd supported me at the previous board meeting, stood up near the end. "Barbara, nobody blames you for this. Karen fooled all of us. You've been a great president. What we need now is to make sure this never happens again." "I agree," Barbara said. "I'm proposing several changes. First, we hire an independent accounting firm to audit our books quarterly. Second, we require 2 board members to approve any expense over $1,000. Third, we make all HOA financial records available online for any homeowner to review at any time. And fourth, we establish a resident oversight committee to monitor board activities." The proposals passed unanimously. At the end of the meeting, an elderly man named George Patterson, Mrs. Patterson's husband, raised his hand. "I have one more proposal. I move that we immediately drop all complaints, fines, and covenant enforcement actions against Jack Morrison regarding his pickup truck. The man parked a tank on his lawn and accidentally saved us from financial ruin. I think he's earned the right to park whatever he wants in his driveway." The applause was thunderous. Even people who'd signed Karen's petition were cheering. Barbara smiled, a real, genuine smile that reached her eyes behind her red glasses. "All in favor?" A forest of hands shot up. Motion passes unanimously. "Jack, your truck is safe. And honestly, the tank can stay too if you want." Over the next week, my story went from local news to national phenomena. "Tankman exposes HOA fraud" became one of the top trending stories on every major news outlet. I did interviews with CNN, Fox News, and even a satellite interview with the BBC. The story had everything the media loved: a veteran standing up for his rights, a tank on a suburban lawn, a corrupt HOA official, and an FBI investigation. My favorite interview was with a late-night talk show host who joked, "So let me get this straight. You wanted to park a truck? They said no, so you parked a tank, and that somehow led to exposing a $400,000 fraud scheme. That's the most American thing I've ever heard." The tank became a tourist attraction. People drove from 3 states away to take pictures with it. I started charging $5 for photos, with all proceeds going to a veterans charity. In 2 weeks, we raised $11,000. Local businesses loved it. The hardware store 2 miles away put up a sign, "We support Tank Man, and we have everything you need for your own projects." A food truck started parking near my house on weekends, selling tank burgers and Whitmore takedown tacos. Barbara handled the media attention with grace. She gave several interviews where she praised my courage and took responsibility for not catching Karen's scheme earlier. She also announced that the HOA was suing Karen for restitution and working with the FBI recover as much of the stolen money as possible. On July 3, 2023, Linda Westbrook held a press conference on my front lawn right next to the tank. She'd aged 10 years in 2 weeks, her face drawn and tired. "I want to apologize to everyone in Meadowbrook Estates," Linda said, her voice shaking. "I knew Karen was doing something wrong. I took money to look the other way. I was a coward. I'm cooperating fully with the FBI, and I'm resigning from the HOA board effective immediately. I'm also donating all $45,000 I received from Karen back to the plus an additional $10,000 from my own savings. It won't fix what I did, but it's a start." I actually felt sorry for her. Karen had been the mastermind, but Linda had been weak and scared. She'd made terrible choices, but at least she was trying to make things right. Barbara accepted Linda's resignation and her financial restitution. The board will appoint a temporary replacement until we hold special elections next month on July 10, 2023. Karen Whitmore was formally arrested and charged with 16 counts of wire fraud, 8 counts of embezzlement, 4 counts of money laundering, and 3 counts of tax evasion. Her bail was set at $500,000. She couldn't make bail. Her assets were frozen, and apparently her wealthy husband had filed for divorce and refused to help her. She spent the next 3 months in federal detention awaiting trial. The local news covered her perp walk Karen in an orange jumpsuit, her expensive haircut now grown out and messy, no makeup, handcuffed, and being led into the courthouse. It was a dramatic fall from the woman who'd clicked up my driveway in designer heels just 3 months earlier. I watched the news coverage from my porch, sitting next to my tank. Tom and Susan Chun came over with beers. "How does it feel?" Tom asked. "Getting justice." I thought about it for a moment. Honestly, it doesn't feel as good as I thought it would. Don't get me wrong, I'm glad she got caught, but I keep thinking about how much damage she did. People in this neighborhood trusted her. Barbara trusted her, and she betrayed everyone for money. "You're too kind-hearted, Jack," Susan said. "That woman tried to ruin your life over a truck. She deserved everything she got." Maybe. But here's the thing. If she'd just left me alone, if she'd focused on actually doing her job instead of harassing me and stealing from everyone, none of this would have happened. She created her own downfall. Barbara pulled up and joined us, accepting a beer from Tom. She'd been working 18-hour days, sorting out the HOA's finances and implementing all the new oversight measures. "How's it going?" I asked. "We recovered $230,000 from Karen's frozen bank accounts," Barbara said. "Her house is going to be seized and sold. That should get us another $300,000 or so, though her mortgage is high. Between that, Linda's repayment, and the insurance claim we filed for board member malfeasance, we should recover about 85% of what was stolen." That's not bad. It's better than I hoped. And you know what? This whole disaster has brought the community together. We've had more residents volunteer for committees in the last month than in the previous 5 years combined. People care now. They're paying attention. All because of a tank? Tom laughed. All because Jack refused to back down. Barbara corrected. "You know, Jack, when you first parked that tank, I thought you were crazy. I was worried you'd get yourself in legal trouble. Ingste. You saved us all. The original vote on Karen's petition to ban vehicles over 10 years old, the vote that was supposed to happen on June 22nd, never took place. With Karen under investigation and Linda resigned, there was no one left to push for it. At the next regular board meeting in August, Robert made a formal motion to permanently table the petition and remove any informal age restrictions from the HOA handbook. "We almost destroyed a man's life over a pickup truck," Robert said. "We almost let bureaucratic nonsense override common sense and decency. I say we make sure that never happens again. If a vehicle is properly maintained, registered, and not causing actual problems, it should be allowed. Period." The motion passed 4-0, with only one board seat still vacant, pending the special election. After the meeting, Barbara pulled me aside. "Jack, I want to ask you something. We need someone to fill Karen's vacant board seat until the special election. Someone the community trusts. Someone who's proven they'll stand up for what's right. Would you consider it?" I laughed. "Barbara, I parked a tank on my lawn. I'm not exactly HOA material. You're exactly HOA material. You care about this community. You understand that rules should serve people, not the other way around. And after everything that's happened, the residents trust you. Let me think about it." That evening, I sat on my porch with my father's picture, the one I kept in my truck's glove compartment. It showed him standing next to his Chevy pickup, the same model as mine, back in 1973. "What would you do, Dad?" I asked the picture. My father had always been a community guy. He'd served on the town council, coached Little League, organized Neighborhood Watch. He believed in being involved, in making things better. I called Barbara. "Okay, I'll do it, but only until the special election. That's all I'm asking." "Thank you, Jack." 3 days later, on August 15th, 2023, I got a call from Agent Rodriguez. Her voice was tight with excitement. "Jack, I need you to come down to the FBI office. We've found something big." It turns out Karen wasn't working alone, and I'm not talking about Linda. There's a whole network. Karen was part of a multi-state HOA fraud ring that's been operating for 7 years. We're talking dozens of communities, millions of dollars. And Jack, your tank, your whole story going viral, it's given other victims the courage to come forward. We're about to bring down one of the largest HOA fraud operations in American history. So there you have it. What started as me defending my father's truck turned into a federal investigation that was about to expose a massive criminal enterprise. But the story gets even crazier. What happened when the FBI raided the headquarters of this fraud network? How many people were involved? And what did I decide to do with the tank? Comment below with your thoughts on HOA corruption and whether you think communities need better oversight. I'm Jack Morrison, and what started as a fight to keep my father's restored 19 Chevy pickup truck in my driveway led to me parking a 43-ton tank on my front lawn. That viral stunt exposed HOA board member Karen Whitmore's $425,000 embezzlement scheme. But as the FBI investigation deepened, they discovered something much bigger. Karen was part of a multi-state HOA fraud network. Now, let me tell you how one tank helped bring down a criminal empire. August 15th, 2023. I sat in a conference room at the FBI's Denver field office, looking at a wall covered with photographs, charts, and red string connecting dozens of faces and locations. It looked like something out of a crime show, except this was real, and I was somehow at the center of it. Agent Sarah Rodriguez stood at the front of the room with 3 other agents I hadn't met before. Barbara sat next to me, her red glasses perched on her nose, taking notes on her tablet. She'd insisted on coming when I told her about the call. "Mr. Morrison, Miss Chun, thank you for coming," Agent Rodriguez began. "What I'm about to show you is part of an ongoing investigation, so we need your discretion. Jack, your tank stunt did more than expose Karen Whitmore. It opened up a case we've been building for 18 months. She clicked a remote, and a presentation appeared on the screen behind her. Meet the Prestige Property Management Group, or PPMG. On the surface, they're a consulting firm that helps HOAs improve their operations. In reality, They're a sophisticated criminal organization that's been defrauding homeowners associations across 11 states for 7 years. The screen showed a corporate logo, sleek, professional, completely innocuous. Here's how it works. Another agent, Marcus Thompson, explained, PPMG approaches struggling HOAs and offers their services. They promise to improve efficiency, reduce costs, and increase property values. They're very convincing. Once they're hired, they slowly place their own people into key positions, usually as board members or financial managers. People like Karen, Barbara said quietly. Exactly. Karen Whitmore joined your HOA board in March 2019, 4 months after PPMG first contacted Meadow Brook Estates. At the time, you had just lost 2 board members who'd moved away, and you needed replacements. Karen seemed perfect. Professional, organized, financially savvy. She volunteered to handle the financial reports, Barbara said. I thought I was lucky to have someone so competent. That's what they count on. Once their person is in place, they implement the scheme. They create shell companies, inflate contractor bills, and systematically drain the HOA's reserve funds. The beauty of it, from a criminal perspective, is that it's slow enough that most people don't notice until it's too late. Agent Rodriguez pulled up another slide, showing a map of the United States with red dots. We've identified 43 HOAs that have been compromised by PPMG: Colorado, Arizona, Nevada, Utah, Idaho, Wyoming, Montana, New Mexico, Texas, Oklahoma, and Kansas. Primarily western states with growing suburban communities. How much money total? Primera, Asket. We estimate between $12 million and $15 million over 7 years. Some HOAs lost everything. Their entire reserve funds gone. Several had to implement special assessments, charging homeowners an extra $2,000 to $5,000 each to rebuild their reserves. Elderly residents on fixed incomes, young families struggling with mortgages, all victimized by this scheme. Barbara's hand was shaking as she took notes. How did you not catch them sooner? HOA fraud is difficult to prosecute, Agent Rodriguez said. Most HOAs are small, private organizations with minimal oversight. Many victims don't even realize they've been defrauded. They just think their HOA is poorly managed. And when people do suspect something, they usually handle it internally rather than calling the FBI. PPMG counted on that. So what changed? I asked. Agent Thompson smiled. You did, Jack. When your tank story went viral, it included details about Karen's embezzlement. Within 48 hours, we received 27 tips from people in other states saying their HOAs had similar problems. People who'd been suspicious but didn't know who to call. Your story gave them courage to come forward. He clicked to another slide showing newspaper clippings and social media posts. Tankman exposes HOA fraud had become a rallying cry. Other communities started investigating their own finances. Local news stations across the West started doing investigative reports on HOA corruption. One of those tips came from a woman named Patricia Gomez in Phoenix, Arizona, Agent Rodriguez said. She'd been suspicious of her HOA board for 2 years. When she saw your story, she contacted us with detailed financial records she'd been secretly collecting. Her documentation was so thorough, it gave us probable cause for search warrants. What did you find? Everything. PPMG kept detailed records of all their operations. Bank accounts, corporate structures, lists of compromised HOAs, names of every person involved. We executed search warrants on PPMG headquarters in Las Vegas on August 10th. We seized 4 servers, 73 boxers of documents, and arrested the 3 founding partners. The screen showed mugshots of 3 people: Richard Hartley, age 50, Monica Brenner, age 49, and David Jung, age 50. They looked like ordinary business people, the kind you'd see at any corporate meeting. These 3 started PPMG in 2016. Agent Rodriguez continued. Richard Hartley is a former real estate developer who went bankrupt in 2014. Monica Brenner was a property management executive who got fired for embezzlement. David Jung was a CPA who lost his license for helping clients commit tax fraud. They came together and created this scheme. How many people were working for them? Barbara asked. 63 individuals across 11 states. Some were full participants who knew exactly what they were doing. Others were recruited as board members and didn't realize they were part of a criminal organization. They thought they were just getting paid consulting fees for legitimate work. Like Linda Westbrook. Linda's case is complicated. She knew enough to be criminally liable, but she wasn't a core member of the organization. That's why we offered her a plea deal for cooperation. Her testimony is helping us understand the full scope of the operation. Agent Rodriguez stood up and walked to the map. As of today, we've made 37 arrests. We've frozen $18 million in bank accounts. That's more than the estimated theft, which means they were also running other schemes. We're working with the U.S. Attorney's Office to file charges against everyone involved. What happens to the primera? Husket, the ones that lost money. We're setting up a victim restitution fund. Between the seized assets and the inevitable guilty pleas, we should be able to return most of what was stolen. It'll take time, but we're committed to making the victims whole. Barbara raised her hand slightly. Agent Rodriguez, why did you ask us to come here? What do you need from us? 2 things. First, we need you both to testify when this goes to trial. Your HOAS case was the catalyst that broke this open. Your testimony will be crucial. Second, Jack, we need you to keep being visible. Keep doing interviews, keep telling your story. Every time you do, more victims come forward. You've become a symbol of standing up to corruption. I just wanted to keep my truck. Agent Thompson laughed. Yeah. And Rosa Parks just wanted to sit down on a bus. Sometimes ordinary people doing ordinary things trigger extraordinary changes. The FBI held a press conference 3 days later. Agent Rodriguez stood at a podium in front of a wall of FBI logos and American flags, with the U.S. Attorney for Colorado beside her. Today, we're announcing charges against 63 individuals involved in one of the largest HOA fraud schemes in American history. The Prestige Property Management Group and its associates systematically defrauded 43 homeowners associations across 11 western states, stealing approximately $14.7 million from working families and retirees. The news conference was broadcast live on every major network. They showed mugshots, organizational charts, and clips from their investigation. And right in the middle of the presentation, they showed a photo of my tank. This case broke open thanks to an unlikely source, the U.S. Attorney said. A retired Army veteran named Jack Morrison parked a military tank on his front lawn to protest HOA overreach. That act of defiance went viral and inspired victims across multiple states to come forward with information about their own HOAs. Mr. Morrison's courage to stand up for what he believed was right didn't just save his own community, it helped us dismantle a criminal enterprise. My phone exploded with calls and messages. News networks wanted interviews. People magazine wanted to do a feature story. A literary agent called, asking if I wanted to write a book. But the most meaningful call came from Patricia Gomez, the woman in Phoenix whose tip had provided the FBI's breakthrough. Mr. Morrison, I had to call and thank you, she said, her voice thick with emotion. My HOA lost almost $600,000. We're elderly retirees on fixed incomes. When they announced we'd each have to pay $4,700 in special assessments to rebuild the reserve fund, I didn't know how we'd afford it. Some of my neighbors were talking about selling their homes. When I saw your story, I realized we'd been scammed. You saved my community. I'm just glad I could help, Mrs. Gomez. But you're the real hero. You collected the evidence. You made the call. We both did our part. That's how it should work. The first trial started in October 2023. Richard Hartley, the founder of PPMG, faced 87 counts of wire fraud, money laundering, racketeering, and conspiracy. The U.S. Attorney was seeking 40 years in federal prison. Barbara and I both testified. The courtroom was packed with victims from multiple states, many wearing homemade Tankman t-shirts in support. When it was my turn on the stand, the prosecutor asked me to tell my story from the beginning. I talked about my father, the truck, Karen's harassment, and the decision to park the tank. Mr. Morrison, the prosecutor asked. "When you parked that tank on your lawn, did you have any idea it would lead to exposing this criminal organization?" "No, Maham. I just wanted to make a point about property rights and government overreach. I figured maybe I'd get on the local news. My HOA would back down, and that would be the end of it." "But it wasn't the end, was it?" "No. It was the beginning. Once Karen's fraud was exposed, other people started paying attention to their own HOA. They started asking questions, and that led to all of this." The defense attorney cross-examined me, trying to make it seem like I was an attention seeker who'd blown things out of proportion. But every time he pushed, I just calmly explained the facts. I'd been in military briefings with generals. Some civilian lawyer wasn't going to rattle me. Barbara's testimony was even more powerful. She detailed exactly how Karen had manipulated the board, how the fraud had been hidden, and how close Meadow estates had come to financial ruin. "Ms. Chun," the prosecutor asked, "in your professional opinion, as an attorney and HOA president, how sophisticated was this scheme?" "Extremely sophisticated," Barbara said. "These weren't amateur criminals. They understood corporate structure, accounting practices, and HOA governance. They knew exactly how to exploit the weaknesses in HOA oversight. If Mr. Morrison hadn't forced us to look closely at our finances, we never would have caught it." The trial lasted 6 weeks. On November 22nd, 2023, almost exactly 1 year after Karen had first confronted me about my truck, the jury returned guilty verdicts on all counts against Richard Hartley. The judge sentenced him to 37 years in federal prison and ordered him to pay $14.7 million in restitution. Monica Brenner got 32 years. David Jong got 28 years. Karen Whitmore's trial was in December. She tried to claim she was just following orders, that she didn't know it was part of a larger scheme. The jury didn't buy it. She was convicted on all counts and sentenced to 18 years in federal prison. When the verdict was read, Karen broke down crying. I was in the courtroom. Part of me felt bad for her. She was still a human being, and 18 years is a long time. But then I thought about all the families she'd hurt, all the elderly people on fixed incomes who'd been victimized, and I couldn't find much sympathy. Linda Westbrook, who'd cooperated from the beginning, pleaded guilty to conspiracy and received 3 years probation, 600 hours of community service, and a $10,000 fine. She'd already paid back the money she'd received, and the judge took that into account. By January 2024, my story had taken on a life of its own. I'd become a symbol of standing up to bureaucratic corruption. Tankman merchandise was everywhere. T-shirts, coffee mugs, bumper stickers that said, "Park a Tank, Expose Fraud." A documentary film crew spent 2 weeks following me around. They interviewed neighbors, FBI agents, other HOA fraud victims, and even Mike Rodriguez, my buddy, who'd delivered the tank. The documentary, titled 43 Tons of Justice, premiered at Sundance Film Festival in January 2024, and later aired on Netflix. I used my platform to advocate for HOA reform. I testified before the Colorado State Legislature about the need for better oversight of homeowners associations. Several states passed laws requiring HOAs to have independent audits and make their financial records publicly available online. The tank remained on my front lawn through all of this. It had become such an iconic symbol that I couldn't take it down even if I wanted to. My house was now a minor tourist destination. People from all over the country would stop by to take pictures. Mike called me in February. "Jack, I've got a proposition for you. A military museum in Colorado Springs wants to buy the tank for their collection. They're offering $75,000. But here's the thing. They want to display it with a plaque that tells your story. The tank that exposed corruption. What do you think?" I looked out my window at the tank. It had served its purpose. It had saved my truck, exposed massive fraud, and helped bring criminals to justice. But maybe it was time for it to have a proper home where more people could appreciate its history. "Let's do it," I said. "But I want the $75,000 donated to a fund for HOA fraud victims who still haven't recovered their losses." "You're a good man." Jack Morrison. The museum picked up the tank in March 2024. Half the neighborhood came out to watch it leave. Barbara organized a small ceremony where she presented me with a plaque that read Jack Morrison, HOA board member and community hero. He parked a tank and saved us all. But before the tank left, I drove my father's 1985 Chevy pickup truck around it one final time. Just the two of us, the truck that started everything and the tank that finished it. By the spring of 2024, the ripple effects of the case were still spreading. The FBI's HOA Fraud Task Force had expanded nationwide. Congress was holding hearings about HOA regulation. The Community Associations Institute, the industry group for HOAs, had implemented new ethics standards and oversight requirements. More than 300 HOAs across the country had discovered their own fraud schemes after being inspired to audit their books. Most were smaller operations, not connected to people, but they all represented families who'd been victimized and were now getting justice. I stayed on the Meadow Brook Estates HOA board. In the special election, residents voted me in for a full 3-year term. Robert became vice president. We recruited 3 new board members who were committed to transparency and community service. Barbara remained president. She'd been vindicated. Her quick action once she'd discovered the fraud had saved our community from worse damage. The insurance payout and seized assets meant we recovered 94% of what Karen had stolen. My pickup truck still sat in my driveway, gleaming and beautiful. No one ever complained about it again. But the story doesn't end there. In April 2024, I got another call from Agent Rodriguez. Her voice had that same excited edge it had months earlier. Jack, we've got a problem. And by problem, I mean we need your help again. Some of the PPMG members who took plea deals are now recanting their testimony. They're claiming they were coerced. The defense attorneys are trying to get the convictions overturned. We need to shore up the case, and we need community voices. Will you help us? So the fight wasn't over. The criminals we'd caught were trying to escape justice, and once again, I was being called to stand up for what was right. But this time, I wouldn't be alone. This time, hundreds of communities across America were ready to fight back. What happened next will show you the true power of ordinary people refusing to be victims. Comment below with your thoughts on HOA reform and whether you think we've done enough to protect homeowners and what happened to my truck along the way. I'm Jack Morrison. I parked a tank to save my truck, exposed a $425,000 HOA fraud, and helped the FBI dismantle a $14.7 million multi-state criminal network. Now, the criminals were trying to overturn their convictions, and I was being called to fight one last time. April 2024. Agent Rodriguez explained the situation in my living room. Barbara sat beside me, her red glasses reflecting the afternoon sun. 3 defendants are claiming their confessions were coerced, Rodriguez said. If they succeed, it creates reasonable doubt. Other convictions could fall like we need community testimony to show the real impact of their crimes. What do you need? I asked. A victims coalition. People willing to testify about how this fraud destroyed their lives. You've become their voice. Jack, will you organize them? I looked at Barbara. She nodded. Let's do it. Over the next 6 weeks, I became an organizer. I contacted Patricia Gomez in Phoenix, Tom Chun's cousin in Nevada, elderly couples in Utah who'd nearly lost their homes. We created a network of 217 victims across 11 states. We held conference calls. We shared documents. We prepared testimony. And on May 20th, 2024, we all traveled to Denver for the appeals hearing. The courthouse steps were packed. News cameras everywhere. 217 victims, wearing Tankman shirts, stood together. Barbara wore her red blazer. I wore my old Army uniform. Inside, the defense attorneys argued their clients had been pressured into false confessions. They painted them as victims of overzealous prosecution. Then we testified. Patricia Gomez described losing her life savings. A young mother from Utah explained how the special assessment forced her family into bankruptcy. An 83-year-old veteran from Montana cried as he described choosing between medication and HOA fees. I went last. Your Honor, I'm just a guy who wanted to park his dad's truck. I never asked to be tankman. I never asked to be a hero. But when I saw what these criminals did to working families, to veterans, to retirees on fixed incomes. I couldn't stay silent. These defendants aren't victims. They're con artists who exploited the trust of entire communities. Their confessions weren't coerced. They were caught. The judge took 1 week to decide. On May 27, 2024, he denied all appeals. The convictions stood. Justice had won. Meadowbrook Estates threw a community barbecue on June 1st. My front lawn, where the tank once sat, was filled with neighbors, folding tables loaded with food, kids running around playing. Barbara raised a glass of lemonade to Jack Morrison, the man who parked the tank and saved us all. Everyone cheered. Tom Chun walked over, grinning. "So what's next, Jack? You going to park a helicopter? Maybe a submarine?" I laughed. "I think I'm done with military vehicles. The truck is enough." "Speaking of which," Barbara said, pulling out an envelope, "the board voted unanimously. We're officially designating your truck as a historic landmark of Meadowbrook Estates. It's protected forever. No one can ever make you move it." I opened the envelope. Inside was a certificate with a photo of my truck and my father standing next to his identical truck in 1973. "Barbara, I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything. You earned it." June 2025. I was sitting on my porch, polishing my truck, when a car pulled up. A young woman in her 20s stepped out. "Nervous?" "Mr. Morrison, I'm Sarah Whitmore, Karen's daughter." I stood up slowly. "Hello, Sarah. I know you have no reason to talk to me." "My mother, what she did was terrible. She destroyed lives. She destroyed our family. My father divorced her. My brother won't speak to her. I visit her in prison once a month, and every time she just complains about how unfair everything is." "Why are you here, Sarah?" She pulled out an envelope. "She wrote you a letter. I told her I wouldn't deliver it unless I read it first. I made her rewrite it 4 times, until it was actually an apology and not just excuses. I don't know if you'll want to read it, but I needed to try." I took the envelope. "Thank you for coming." After she left, I sat on my porch for an hour, holding the letter. Finally, I opened it. The letter was short. Karen apologized for harassing me, for stealing from the community, for betraying everyone's trust. She said she'd been greedy and selfish. She said seeing her daughter's disappointment every month was worse than prison. She said she hoped someday we could all heal. I read it twice, then put it in a drawer. Maybe someday I'd forgive her. Maybe not. But at least she'd finally taken responsibility. Today, my 1985 Chevy pickup sits in my driveway, gleaming red, perfectly maintained. A small plaque on my garage reads, "Historic Landmark. The truck that started it all." The tank sits in the Colorado Springs Military Museum. Over 50,000 people visit it every year. The plaque tells the whole story. Barbara is still HOA president. She's started a consulting business, helping other HOAs implement transparency and oversight. She's testified before 5 state legislatures. The FBI's HOA Fraud Task Force has investigated over 800 cases nationwide, recovering more than $42 million for victims. And me, I'm still just Jack Morrison, retired veteran, HOA board member, and the guy who parks his father's truck in his driveway. But sometimes, when I'm polishing that truck, neighbors stop by to say thank you. Kids ask to hear the story about the tank. Tourists take photos. And I realize that standing up for what's right, even in small ways, even over something as simple as a pickup truck, can change everything. My father taught me to fight for what matters. That truck honored his memory. The tank honored every person who refuses to be bullied. And that's a legacy worth having. To everyone watching this, you don't need a tank to make a difference. You just need courage to stand up when something's wrong. Check your HOA finances. Ask questions. Hold people accountable. And never, ever let anyone tell you that your father's truck is ugly. Thank you for following my story. This is Jack Morrison, signing off. And yes, the truck is still parked in my driveway exactly where it belongs, What did you think of Jack's incredible journey? Have you ever had to stand up to your HOA or any authority? Share your stories in the comments below. And remember, sometimes the biggest changes start with the smallest acts of defiance, like parking a tank on your lawn.